Hi, you've tuned into CKUW 95.9 FM here in Winnipeg, Manitoba. I'm Tammy Wolf, the host of Truth Before Reconciliation. I'm here with a great guest today, Nayana LaFond. She is coming to join us all the way from Massachusetts in the United States. So welcome, Nayana.
Thank you so much for having me, Tammy. I'm really grateful to be here.
She's actually going to have a conversation with me today on the issue of missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls and Two-Spirit people. She's going to be telling us a little bit about her project, the MMIWG/P painting project that she started. So I thought maybe you could just start with telling the listeners a little bit about yourself before we get into our conversation.
Absolutely. Bonjour, Nayana LaFond Indigenica. I am, my family is originally from the Wikwemokong area and Three Rivers, Quebec. I'm Anishinaabe, Abenaki, and Mi'kmaq. I'm also French and German. I live in Massachusetts, so for me, finding out about MMIP, which I'll just use as a blanket term from now, I never even realized I was part of it. I just was in that situation that I think we all find ourselves, unfortunately, in, and barely survived my own experience. So through that and connecting with my community after getting away and starting my life over, I started this project just as a means to process my own emotions, because most of my work has always been about that. So I started it with one painting on May 5th, 2020. And the response from my online community was so strong, I thought I'll do a couple more. But it was so overwhelming after that, people just kept messaging me, that I decided that I couldn't say yes to some and no to others. So I dedicated myself to painting them all and doing so for free. So now families contact me, I meet with them, I paint their loved one, I send them anywhere from 1 to 30 free prints. And then I exhibit the originals all over Turtle Island to raise awareness. So starting this year, actually, I have a 3-year touring show, 5 solo shows this year and 3 next year.
And so how did the idea come about? Like, so you've talked about processing your own healing, and so you're personally impacted. And so you just decided one day somebody had sent you this photo and you began to paint. So have you been doing art like all your life? Is this just something new, or?
I've been processing trauma through being a maker. Basically my whole life, everything from painting to sculpture, beadwork, photography, sewing, whatever I could get my hands on was a means of processing trauma. So I think a lot of our stories start with childhood trauma, and that's where I started being an artist. So that's when I started processing things, same through leukemia and through the relationship that eventually led me to be inspired to do this project. I was producing art through that helped me process as well. So this was a natural transition for me to make a piece to process my own emotions about my experience. And then the response I got, I realized I needed to continue this for my own healing, for medicine, and also for those who were reaching out to me.
And so how are people reaching out to you? Is this just something that happened like over, you did say last year, or I guess 2020? Which is so was this just over the pandemic then?
This has just been since the pandemic. On May 5th, 2020, I was on Social Distance Powwow, which is a group on Facebook. And that's where I found the first woman I painted. Her name is Lorena Bear from Saskatchewan. And I just shared it to the group, and that is how I've been receiving messages. People have just seen the paintings. So I started doing them on live stream to the group. So now I paint live to the group each time. So people will reach out to me, send me a message, ask me, are you the one doing this? And then I explain to them that I'm doing it for free, and we exchange information, and then it goes from there. I have a running queue of at least 30 at a time.
Wow, really? So this is an open call then? Is this like, this is still an open call that you're doing?
Kind of. I put one post saying people could contact me, and I haven't had to put any more out. It's just been streaming in. Each time I post a finished piece or I do a live stream, people will reach out to me.
Beautiful. And so you did mention that you you're touring. So do you want to talk a
Yes.
little bit more about that?
Sure. Early on in the series, when I had finished about 25 of them, I was contacted by the Emerson Center in Bozeman, Montana, to do a group show there with artists from Montana on this subject. So I was honored to be asked to be included, and 12 of those pieces were sent for that show. They later contacted me and the other artists involved and informed us that it was the highest attended show in the history of the Emerson,
Wow.
that people were flying there to see it, and that some donor, who they still haven't notified us of who, had contacted them and basically made a donation to send the show. So it will be 15 or 16 of my pieces. They're changing them out now, which ones, and selected pieces from those other artists as well, to kind of create a full picture of the situation. In fact, one of the women I painted, she unfortunately died before she could graduate from high school. So her beaded cap and gown are going on tour with the painting of her.
Really?
So that is the plan. It's starting this year. They're creating and selecting art right now, and it's supposed to go for 3 years. They're looking for venues all over the place. Right now, I think they're focused in the States, but I'm trying to push them to expand to Canada.
Beautiful. And so I guess from your project, it's expanding, and it's kind of, I guess, I want to say it's almost like storytelling, right? Like it's opening up to tell the stories of each of the loved ones that you're painting.
Yes. Yes, actually, I meet with each family beforehand, and sometimes it's brief, and sometimes they spend quite a bit of time telling me a lot. And then I tell them, please specify what you will allow me to share, because it becomes storytelling. And it's important to share these stories so that these people aren't forgotten. Behind me, I have a painting of a woman named Emily, whose murder is still unsolved, despite the fact that there was video footage of it occurring. The other woman I have behind me, I unfortunately had to paint her daughter, who was found at 17, two of her nieces, both of whom were murdered by their boyfriends, one in 2018, the other in 2020, and her other niece as well. So it's become kind of a catharsis for me. And also it seems to be that way for those around me, and a way to tell a story and a way to be heard.
For sure. And I mean, that's one of the things that I do on this show. That's why I named my show, Truth Before Reconciliation, because I feel like, even so, like you mentioned the pandemic, I feel like it's kind of, this pandemic has given people an opportunity to kind of sit down and actually listen. You also mentioned storytelling. And so really these truths are coming out, and people now, I feel like, are coming forward to do that storytelling. Do you find that like that's what's happening?
I think so. People are getting braver and braver to tell their stories. I know doing this has forced me to be more open about my own, even. I've been pretty closed about that. And I think anyone who's been through it, it's very difficult to open up about these things. A lot of the families are really emotional about it, but being able to open up, tell the stories, be honest about it, and be heard, and all of those things, I think it's helping a lot of people during this time, especially with the pandemic. We've all kind of had to reassess our priorities.
For sure. No, I definitely really recognize with that myself. For the listeners out there who do tune into my show regularly, you would know that I am personally impacted by MMIWG. I know last year, I don't know if it was either last year or 2020, that me and my sister actually did come on the show, and we told my mother's story, because I did lose my mother when I was 18. She was murdered. And so it took us almost 20 years to tell our story, right? And it did kind of come out during the pandemic, as you mentioned, like that kind of reassessment, or looking at ourselves, really looking at, and I think it really kind of boils down to healing. I know that you mentioned for yourself that was something. I know even for myself, I do a lot of bead work.
Mhm.
It's very therapeutic. So did you maybe want to talk a little bit more about that healing aspect in your art?
Yes, actually, art has been my therapeutic healing method my whole life. So it was kind of obvious that this would be the case with this, but it's come to a different level than I expected with this particular project because I'm able to put my own feelings into each piece, and I understand how each of these people felt, and it's become a almost medicine. That makes sense.
Mhm.
And
No, I totally hear that.
yeah, and that's been huge for me as someone who has had a lot of physical ailments in my life. I had a bone marrow transplant. All of these things I barely survived my own experience that led me to this. And just going through this, I feel like it's been healing both my spirit as well as my body because I felt stronger and more empowered. And I'm hoping that those whose stories I'm telling, those who are still with us, that they feel a little more empowered, and those who aren't, I think it's easy to forget them. There's
Mhm.
so many, and just knowing that they're not forgotten, because I think about myself and how I could have very easily become one of them.
Right.
And
Yeah, definitely. I feel like when the word that you use, medicine, that's the word that I use in regards to my beadwork. I talk about beadwork as medicine, and really looking at, like, for my own self, when you tell about your own story and say how you're personally impacted, I always think about my own healing and how really I'm always looking at that physical, mental, spiritual, and emotional. So that holistic, and I know I've talked about it on the show here before with previous guests. That's really, that's our traditional way of viewing the world, is that we look at those four things rather than just, in Western society, it tends to really look at the physical and the mental health, but
mhm,
really kind of lacking in that emotional and that spiritual health. And even for myself, it took a really devastating thing to happen to me in my life to really recognize how much that emotional and that spiritual is tied to my physical well-being and my mental well-being. And so using art as kind of like a medium to kind of like sort through, I see that, I feel that, I hear that. And then also those connections that you're building with the families, because you're helping those family members to find that healing, to find that, yeah, I want to say that medicine, because they're
yeah,
seeing their loved one honored.
yeah. There was the there is one woman who I painted who her mother heard that she would be going on the tour, and she said she was happy because it meant she'd get to see more of the world. So it's those kind of things are medicine. And like you said about that it's all connected. I look back on when I was in my position and I felt alone, and that's also part of why I'm doing this, is to help other people not feel alone and to get the courage to leave and to start fresh. And because a lot of these situations are based in domestic violence, and so I want to raise the awareness not just for those who are being abducted by someone they don't know, but also for those who are in that situation now. I had cancer for a reason. All of these things are connected, and so you have to think of it as medicine. And we've always had this tradition, like you said, of the things that we make being makers and the things that we do as medicine. So I've really felt that both physically and spiritually. So I appreciate very much. I feel like I was somehow called to do this.
No, definitely. I also hear that as well. I always think about, people's true intention and purpose in life, right? And that's one of the things for myself. Like, that's why I went and I got a master's degree. I'm working through my master's degree in Indigenous governance, and specifically my thesis was looking at MMIWG. Why? Because I lost my mother, and one
Yeah.
of the things that I always say is it's not about the degree. it's not about the master's degree. It's about the contribution that I feel that I can make in that position to try to honor loved ones, to honor my loved one, to honor other people's loved ones. And what I did for mine was to collect those stories, very similar to the way in which you're doing so with your art. I collected those stories, and I hope that does bring that healing, and then also that awareness, right? Like your stories are traveling across the States and then hopefully into Canada, which I guess kind of brings me to my next, I guess, question is how do you feel about the movement that's happening in the States? So I know that here in Canada, we're kind of just seeing this kind of uncover within the last couple of years. How do you feel about that?
I have mixed feelings about it. I see a lot of good, but then I also see a lot of, I think, placation. So it's, there's been some progress with some political figures making some moves and making a show of it. I haven't seen real physical movement yet, though. There's been things been putting into place and a lot of voices being raised, which I'm excited about in the US. Canada, I'm less familiar with what's going on there just because my sister lives there in Vancouver, but the gap is there, even though there isn't a physical, literal gap.
Yes.
And so here I see movement, but I don't see enough movement, which is why me and many other people are doing whatever we individually can to raise awareness. I was asked the other day by someone online, like, what good does awareness raising do? And I'm like, well, a lot, but it is a small piece of a much bigger picture. And if we can't get all these other pieces in as well, then nothing is really going to happen here or in Canada. So I see progress, which is encouraging in the last 2 years. President Biden declared May 5th Missing and Murdered Indigenous Peoples Day. Deb Haaland opened up the unsolved cases, but until change is happening in the communities, I don't know how much progress we'll make yet. All we can do is keep individually doing what we're doing and coming together.
For sure. Yeah, definitely. I mean, I as well, you're actually the first person from the States to come on. I did do an ongoing series last year on MMIWG, and I was hoping to find somebody from the States to speak. So I'm super happy to have you on today to talk about that. I do feel like the movement that's happening in the States is much like what's going on here in Canada, right? Is that the lip service. I mean, we did have our national inquiry, which was released in 2019. But really, it sounds to me like you guys are doing on the same foot as we're doing. It's grassroots movements. It's the people. It's people like you and me who are personally impacted. Kind of taking the reins and trying to exactly what you said. That advocacy or that activism, that awareness, spreading the awareness of the problem. And I feel like that really is where we need to still be, right? Like that. Once again, that truth-telling process, right? Yeah. We're not even there yet. So
it's just standing up and being heard. There's a handful of activists who I've painted 72 people so far. And in that 72, there's a handful of activists I've kind of spread out through there who I wanted to highlight, because I need people to also realize that people are actively doing things for this, and those people deserve to be recognized, and we should pay attention to what they're doing and realize that they're there, because we are all working on this together and we need to keep doing so.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I would love to see some collaboration. I know that there was specifically, I feel that was maybe the same year that they were wrapping up the inquiry here in Canada. There was somebody, I think, across the border who was collectively taking all of the names. Are you familiar?
I think I've heard of this person, but I don't know who they are, but I would like to connect with them
right now. Yeah. I think she's still actively doing that, is collecting names and trying to, I guess I want to say, put together a database And so really, like, I want to say doing away with that line. And I
Yeah.
feel like that's what it is, right? It's like there's this colonial line that is separating Canada and the US, when really, when we're looking collectively at this problem, you know, even as Indigenous people, right? Like it's a make-believe line. So like
Yeah.
for us, we're all connected across Turtle Island and even into the south, right, into Mexico. Before all of this, we were traveling up and down the coasts and throughout the country. So I mean, I feel like there needs to be something that brings us together. Hopefully this project.
Instead of separating it into Canada and the US, maybe there just needs to be a collective. Because I feel like a lot of these cases too kind of are on the border physically.
Right.
So it becomes a gray area of jurisdiction and things like that.
Right.
And there's a lot of jurisdictional issues with Indigenous land and government land and locations and fictional borders. And so it needs to be one and not multiple, because I think that might be part of the issue. There's a lot of issues here though.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, just scratching the surface, right? But I do feel, I feel positive, and I feel like there is some really beneficial stuff that is happening. You know, your projects being one of those. I know, like, we just connected online, and I mean, that's so great. Like for you to, I feel like, there's a reason, right? I always do say that creator puts me in the path of people on purpose. And so hopefully, potentially connect you to people or such, or just spread that more so that awareness, right? And really trying to build those connections. Because I mean, what's happening in the States is really not that much different, just because of the line in the sand, right?
Yeah.
But I guess I did want to have a conversation as well about, your biggest takeaways. So I know that you're doing this ongoing project. There's really no end in sight for this.
Really, no. People ask me that a lot. Like, how many are you going to do? 100? Are you going to do? I can't, honestly. It doesn't sit well with my heart, if that makes sense, to just cap it off. I do other things too, but I'm just going to keep doing it as long as I have to, which is probably indefinite. But I guess my takeaway really is that for me, it's helped me to heal in a lot of ways. And so I'm just going to continue it for that reason alone. Just the people who come to me when I have an art opening. And the last one I had, a woman came to me and gave me a hug and cried. And it's because of those people that I'm like, yes, I will take another, I will take another, I will take another. So for me, I don't know when this is going to end, probably never. I hope it would be great. But given the amount of people, my personal project has become about the numbers now.
Right. Yeah, well, I mean, even mentioning, I wish that I could remember her name, the one who's collectively taking the numbers. Because I mean, that was one of the things that we struggled with here in Canada too, was like the amount of numbers. And I mean, specifically looking at my case, or I guess my mother's murder, she's not even in the statistics in that, because of the circumstances surrounding her death. And so, I mean, it's so I want to say up in the air, and the fact that like how many people, and I mean, especially it up to, right, to people, not just this. So this isn't just women and girls. This is people. This is men as well.
Yeah, absolutely. This is men as well. And if you think about the cases that aren't reported,
right?
If you think about all of those things, had I not survived, I would have been among the uncounted.
Right.
And so you have to think about the people who are in urban settings where they're not classified necessarily as First Nation or Indigenous, and those people aren't being counted. There are a lot of people where their circumstances or whatever. So it's got to go a lot more than the list we even know about. And that's what's hard about it. There's just a lot more.
And so what is your biggest takeaway? So if you had to choose, like, I guess your greatest lesson, or I know that earlier before we started the interview, you talked about this being a huge learning experience for
Yeah.
you, when it's ongoing and there's no end in sight. What would be your biggest takeaway from this project?
It's actually a positive, which is unusual for a project like this, I feel like. But my biggest takeaway has been just the sense of not being alone
Right.
and the empowerment that has come from it, both for me and the people that I've been around because of it. And because I felt so much alone myself. So it's about bringing people together is my biggest takeaway from it, is that it has brought people, and I hope it continues to. And it's been bringing medicine.
Right. Well, I mean, it brought us together.
Yeah,
And I would love, honestly, I would love to submit a photo of my mother to you. Yeah, that would just, like,
absolutely.
honor
And
my mom.
and so that you and everyone else knows, it is for free. All I require is a photo or photos sent to me. Then we will have a conversation about what's appropriate for you or your family. And then once the original is finished, I photograph it with a high resolution. You and your family will have the high resolution file to do whatever you want with. Then I send you prints, as many as you want. Most I've sent was 33 to a family, so I don't tend to say no. And then the originals, I haven't sold any originals because I'm trying not to. It would defeat the purpose of exhibiting them to raise awareness.
Right.
So the originals then go out to be seen.
So
So
specifically, if somebody wants to see this traveling,
mhm.
if anybody is, I know that we're in Canada here, we're on Treaty 1 territory, but if somebody is going to the States despite the pandemic, where can people see these paintings?
Well, the official tour schedule and locations hasn't been released yet, but
Oh,
if you go to the Emerson Center website, which is in Bozeman, Montana, they will be listing it. And my website, nayanaarts.com, I will be listing it as well. As soon as I know where all the dates are, it
can you
will
plug
also
that
be on
again?
social media.
Can you plug your website again?
Yes, nayanaarts.com. There are
And
two
I
A's next
will,
to each other. So it's NAYANAARTS.com.
perfect. And I will try and get that link as well up on the Truth Before Reconciliation website. So we are kind of at the getting closer to the end of the show. I thought maybe we'll like as always, we always do suggestions for the listeners, for people out there who want to get involved. You know, such inspiration you took to start this project and begin painting and kind of using your medium, your way through art to kind of spread awareness. What's your suggestions for people out there who want to get involved or have an idea or how to get started? What would you suggest?
I think we all have our thing that we do. I happen to be a painter. You mentioned beadwork. I think it's been a long-standing tradition of using these things as medicine. So I would just ask people to look at themselves and say, what is it that you have that you're able to do? Whether it's beating something or writing something or performing or speaking or sharing your story or sharing something someone else does. If you see something on social media someone else did that you think is inspiring, share it. The more we get it out there and seen, whether it's something that you make or someone else makes or says or shares, the louder we become and the harder to ignore we become. And we, as a people, we were taught that these are the gifts that we were given. So let's use them. Whatever your gift is, use it.
That's a beautiful message. Beautiful, beautiful message. Definitely, I can't I can't even say more splendid words than, use your gift that you're given. And that is true, very, very true. Creator's given us all gifts. One of them for me, I feel like, is having you, Nayana, on today's show to come in and showcase what you're doing and your movement. the MMIWG/P painting project that you started to honor loved ones. So thank you so much, Nayana.
Well, it's been an honor to be here. It's meant a lot to me. It means a lot to me to have my voice get out there. For me, it means all the things I went through was for something good. So thank you. Miigwech.
Thanks, Nayana. This has been Tammy Wolf and Nayana LaFond on Truth Before Reconciliation. So hopefully come back next week. We'll have a new show up for you guys. This is Truth Before Reconciliation on CKUW 95.9 FM. Thanks so much for tuning in with us again today.